Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first event of the Belle Gallery fall season. My name is Joanne Conklin. I'm the director of the gallery, and I'm really happy to see a fairly nice crowd here on this beautiful early fall evening, so thank you all for coming. Tonight we celebrate the opening of Fertile Ground, featuring the work of María Berrío, Zoë Charlton, and Joiri Minaya, and guest curated by Brown alumna and independent curator Heather Bindari. And we're delighted that all four of them are here this evening to talk to us about their work. The format will be 3 short presentations, one by each artist, followed by a conversation that Heather will lead and a Q&A. And we're going to take a really fast break and set up the table before that happens. But before we get to that, there are a couple of announcements that I'd like to make. First, I want to welcome our newly appointed Belle Gallery curator, Kate Craxton. And Kate, if you... Kate joins us from the ICA in Philadelphia, where she recently curated the retrospective of Lee Morton's work entitled The Plant That Heals May Also Poison. The exhibition is currently on view at the Tang Museum, so you can catch it there, and it's well worth it. And we'll travel to the Institute of Contemporary Art in LA later in the year. So please feel free to introduce yourself to Kate during the reception. I'm really looking forward to having her on board. I think we're all going to enjoy getting to know her and work with her. So. I also want to mention that Fertile Ground is mounted with the support of the Brown Arts Initiative and is in conjunction with the initiative's theme of art and environment. And next Thursday and Friday, the 19th and 20th, the BAI will convene its Arts and Environment Symposium, which this year addresses humanity's relationship to land. It's entitled Terra, Art, Land, Justice, and the symposium is free and open to the public. I hope you will join us. You do need to register, so for further information and to reserve a seat, you can do that online at art.brown.edu. Our exhibition this evening, Fertile Ground, focuses on the work of 3 women of color who explore issues relating to race and identity through the lens of women's bodies and nature. Each produce visually arresting artwork. María Berrío's large and stunning torn paper collages depict surrealist narratives that draw on the artist's memory of South American mythology and explore themes such as intercultural connectivity and migration. Born in Bogotá, Colombia, Berrío moved to New York when she was 18 to attend Parsons School of Design. She received her BFA from Parsons in 2004, followed by an MFA from the School of the Visual Arts. Maria's work has been shown throughout the US and in international venues, most notably at the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, Weatherspoon Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Museum of the Barrio in New York, and in Prospect 4, the Triennial in New Orleans, where her beautiful image was featured on the cover of the catalog. This summer, she had solo exhibitions at the Cone Gallery in Los Angeles and contributed work to group exhibitions at the Ford Foundation Gallery in New York and Victoria Miro Gallery in London. And she also creates public works. Most recently, her multi-part glass and ceramic mosaic panels were installed at Hamilton Parkway subway station in Brooklyn under the auspices of the MTA Art and Design program. And Maria, are those open? Is that open to the public now? They look beautiful. Everyone should go and check them out. Like Berrío, Zoë Charlton works in collage, but employs drawings and hundreds of stickers to create sprawling, layered narratives that explore identity and race. Zoë was born in Tallahassee, Florida, and the Floridian landscape features strongly in the works that are in our exhibition tonight. Zoë received her BFA from Florida State University in Tallahassee and her MFA from the University of Texas in Austin in 1999. She's participated in numerous residencies, among them Art Pace in San Antonio, and at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, and at the Contemporary Arts Center in North Adams. Her work has been included in national and international exhibitions, including those at the Studio Museum of Harlem in New York, the Baltimore Museum of Art, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, and the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston, Texas. Zoë lives in Baltimore, Maryland, where she co-founded Syndicate, spelled S-I-N-D-I-K-I-T, which is a collaborative art space for experimental practice. And she teaches at American University, where she's an associate professor in the art department. Joiri Minaya makes multidisciplinary works, predominantly in performance, sculpture, video, and photography, and they explore constructions of identity, multicultural social spaces, and hierarchies. Her work in Fertile Ground deconstructs stereotypes of the tropical. Joiri was born in New York City and grew up in the Dominican Republic. She graduated from the National School of the Visual Arts in Santo Domingo and Altos de Chevron School of Design, and received her BFA from Parsons School of Design in 2013. She has exhibited across the Caribbean and in the US, including performances at the New Museum in New York, the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Art in Brooklyn, and at the 27th National Biennale of Visual Art in Santo Domingo, among other venues. Her solo exhibitions have been mounted at Wave Hill, the Museum of the Barrio, New York, and the Image Center in San Diego. And she's held numerous group exhibitions. In fact, I was talking to her earlier, she had 5 or 6 exhibitions in the last month or so. So a very busy woman. She has shown in group shows at the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco, at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, and at the Houston Center for Photography. Locally, in addition to our exhibition, she is featured in works that are currently on view at the Wedding Cake House, which is a project of the Dirt Palace Art Collective in the Armory District, and she's working on a commission for Providence College. So I'd like to take just a moment to acknowledge the Belle Gallery staff whose efforts bring our programs to fruition. We couldn't do it without them. They are Terrence Abbott, Kate Craxon, Nicole Holian, Nishan Hale, Louis Turley, Murphy Chang, and Deborah Krieger. And a very special and heartfelt thanks to Heather Bhandari for skillfully bringing these artists' work to us this evening. It's been a great pleasure to get to know Heather over the past few months, and she's been terrific to work with. So please join me in welcoming all of the above, and we'll start with a talk by Maria.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm very honored to be here tonight and to talk a little bit about my work. Well, Joanne did a great job explaining what my work is about, but I want to talk briefly about what I do. So I create fantastical worlds that explore the blending of different cultures and a relationship between humans and nature. In this, some of my recent work talks about deal with migration, and like some of my characters are in this moments of displacement or moments of transitions. Most of my work is made with collage, as you can see. These are all like Japanese papers. These are all handmade Japanese papers that I source from different places, not only Japan, but I also Nepal, Brazil, Mexico, Korea. This is some of as you can see, some of these works are some of the most recent works that I just showed at this summer at Con Gallery. A lot of them have different, like in this most recent work, most of them were interiors, and they're kind of very different to what you can see here at the gallery. They use less pattern papers and are more, I'm creating my own patterns. The women who inhabit my paintings are embodied ideals of femininity, like the ghostly pallor on their skin suggests an otherworldliness. They appear to be more spirit than flesh. These are women I want to be, like strong, vulnerable, compassionate, courageous, and in harmony with themselves. My practice is deeply influenced by magical realism. Some of my favorite authors are like Jorge Luis Borges, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Pablo Neruda. What else can I tell you? I don't know. See, these are some of the most recent works. And this particular piece I created for Prospect 4 is titled A Luna, and it talks about the myth. In South America, there is a tribe called the Cogis, and the Cogis live in the Sierra Nevada of Santa Marta, and they believe in once one of their sons of a shaman is born, what they do is that they keep them inside a cave for 9 years. And during that time, they want the kid to connect to their interiors instead of the exterior. And then after 9 years, the kid, the son of the shaman comes out of the cave and for the first time is able to see the world. So I thought it was a very beautiful tradition in South America, and I created this piece, but it was also thinking about the idea of like our current relationship with nature and with ecology and what we're doing to the planet. So when the kid comes out, he sees that everything is flooded. So this was one of the pieces I created for Prospect 4. This is another of the pieces I created for Prospect 4 that talks a little bit as well about migration and this idea of this human, this woman taking a feather from the bird and attaching it to the human, and this idea of freedom and the freedom we lose or the freedom we gain when we move to another country. This was one of the biggest pieces I created for Prospect 4 that is titled Wildflowers, and this piece makes symbolism to us as immigrants in a sense of we vastly reproduce in different places, but in a sense of what we carry, the beauty of our tradition and the beauty of making it kind of symbolic of us as flowers as well. So it's kind of bitter and sweet piece. This is another piece, it's titled The Nightingales. So this is going into the more of my past work. I want to go back to one of the recent pieces. Sorry, I'm going so fast. This piece I created very recently. It's very large scale, and it's titled Oda a la Esperanza, which in English it translates to Ode to Hope. Esperanza in Spanish it means either to wait or to hope. So I created this piece recently during the Trump administration family separation policy. and I'm a mother as well. So it was a moment where I kind of thought, what would it feel to be separated from my kid? So I created this piece. These women could either be the mothers or the daughters. There's the bird, the bird could also be either their sons or their freedom. So it's just like this. I was very connected to it because it was a moment of waiting, and I thought it was important to make it right now. But the presence of this woman also gave me a lot of hope. So yeah, so that's some of the most recent work. I don't know, what else? If you have any questions, we'll go. We'll go through all the questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather, for including my work in the show. I've had such a wonderful time. I love it when my work is put in context with other artists that I admire, and I'm so excited to be in this show with you both. Joanne, I appreciate everything that you've done, and even your constant emails. I love it. So I'm gonna read a little bit so that I don't forget much, but while visiting my parents a few years ago, I came across this image of my brother and me. My mother surprised us, the story is that she surprised us on Halloween with Halloween morning with our costumes, and we threw them on, and I mean, look at how excited we are. We're so excited. Now imagine my surprise as an adult seeing this image. I asked my mom, "What is this?" I'm dressed like Barbie, and my brother's dressed like Casper. And my mom looked at me, and with a smirk, she said, "Don't say I never gave you anything. I gave you your content for life." And she did. So I am a figure drawer. I mean, just a traditional figure drawer. I have models come into my studio, and I draw them. I work with anywhere between 4 and 7 models at a given time. The bulk of my work is comprised of large-scale drawings of women. And they're often isolated from the background, and they wear a variety of clothes or props. But I also make drawings with collages, and I use images that I source from stores. I'm going to Michael's, I'm going to AC Moore, and they are of masks, they are trees and gift boxes and little birds and different landscapes. So I use these stickers and I pair them with graphically painted objects, and I combine them with drawn and painted figures. And what I do is I scan those stickers and enlarge them and print them out in the same way that those original stickers come. So if they come in vinyl, I print them large scale in vinyl. If they're on paper, I do that. If they're in tracing paper, I do that. And then I use the wall to create these large scale collages. My work circles around ideas of cultural tourism, of race, and I use humor, and I pull from a variety of sources, my own experiences, history, and bad jokes. This particular piece is about Kalulu, who was Henry Morton Stanley's companion, adopted son. He's called a variety of different things. But I was interested in Kalulu's story because he died when he was 13 years old. His canoe, his boat capsized over Victoria Falls. And the story goes is Stanley was so distraught that he renamed Victoria Falls Kalulu Falls in memory of him. And I wanted to envision Kalulu as an adult. And what he's doing here is he's carrying a variety of landscapes on his back in different kinds of packs. One is an imagined Tanzanian landscape, and the other is an imagined European landscape. So I make drawings in a variety of sizes. This is probably about 120 inches wide, and it's done on 2 panels. And this is an example of some of the kinds of work that you'll see in the show. This is called The Country, a Wilderness Unsubdued. And these are all inspired by my grandmother's story. My grandmother was a homeowner starting in the 1920s and 30s, at a time when many black women didn't own property in the panhandle of Florida. And what I remember is the lushness of the landscape in this house that she lived in. And I've spent the last few years trying to bring those memories to the surface. And so while I was at Art Pace last summer, I worked with a group of artists and crafts people and construction workers to build a half-scale replica of her house. And I turned it upside down and placed model train houses on the inside of it that are covered in glitter and the same color as the original house to talk about gentrification. And that house comes back into the work as a flat image. And this is one of the most recent pieces that I created. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for coming here today, and thanks to Joanne and Heather and the staff at Belle Gallery. And likewise, it's a great pleasure to show with Maria and Zoë. Okay, so I'm gonna start showing this video. Let me see if it's loud. It's a video I did in 2014 that I tend to show first because it kind of lays out a number of concerns that I'm still unpacking. And in this video, I'm painting a mural based on a found piece of fabric in a museum wall, and kind of performing for the camera as I record the action and posing questions and ideas that have to do with the imagined landscape, the racialized and gendered body, and the labor that sustains tropical fantasy. In it, I'm meditated on who speaks for who in representation and who determines these aesthetics in relation to place or bodies. Who does it please, what is omitted, and whose labor maintains it. The music was composed originally by Ernesto Lecuona, who's a Cuban composer in the 30s. But his version was about nostalgia and missing his homeland, whereas the version that I'm using is Connie Frances's that she did in the 60s, which is drum heavy and is a more sensual interpretation. And I thought that change or transformation was kind of echoing of other transformations of cultural products, like the wallpaper, the painting on the wall, which is why I thought of pairing them together. So this was shown like this at the end of the exhibition. That was kind of the process of making it, but it's also shown with the videos of how it's made. I moved to New York age like 21 for attending Parsons. I was born in New York, but I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and a constant experience was people asking me where I was from, where my accent was from. It started coming to my attention that sometimes I would say Dominican, and people would be like, oh, Dominican, and I was kind of stuck on what that O meant, so I Googled Dominican women on Google, and and found these images, and I started making collages with them, and again, meditating on nature, landscape, how the landscape is framed, how the body is constructed within this landscape, and trying to deconstruct it and make new bodies from these pieces of bodies. Also thinking of art history and how Black and brown women in the tropics have been represented throughout our history. And it was interesting to me that the places where I found these websites, the websites where I found these images, a lot of them were catalogs for men who wanted to date a Dominican woman on their vacations, so that those series became kind of parallel to the one on like the white men painting Black and brown women in the tropics, and then white men dating these women through these websites. I printed these as postcards, and I started dropping them in random gift shops as I traveled around, and kind of just surreptitiously leaving them there. They have my email in the back. No one has ever emailed me. And then from this same body of images, I did this installation called #Dominican Women Google Search that is printed on Sintra board with parts of the images that I was using, and then the backside is covered with fabric from found tropical shirts that I found on thrift stores. And I was interested in the idea of the collage, but also in these bodies kind of recombining themselves into new bodies without me positioning them in a static place. And also the female body in the landscape, and trying to challenge the ideas that make those two bodies interchangeable through like iconography. Let's see. Oh, I think I restarted it. How do I move out of here? Okay. And then also following that thread, the work that I'm showing at the gallery today is part of this series called Containers, which started as a photo series, has now transformed into a live performance / video performance series, although I am still committed to the photos, but I haven't worked on them for a while. This is the first photo of that series. It's kind of moved by the idea of, from the postcards, there were some postcards where I was covering the bodies of these women with the same pattern design that to me is a result of this imagination about the tropics. And I just wanted to see that three-dimensionally, so I sewed a bodysuit and got myself in it and got my mom to photograph me in it. And it was during a trip to a natural resort that we did, and after I saw the photo, I started thinking of these constructions of natural and how this is a human-made place, but it's presented as natural, and how that echoed other constructions of the landscape and of the bodies that I was trying to understand. I'm gonna show 1 minute excerpt of the performance part of this, and hope it's not too loud.
Camouflage, or how to lose your native accent in 5 quick steps. Whenever you forget, there will be someone there to remind you, diligently pointing out your difference. You can pretend to think about all sorts of universal things, but a stare, a tone, a question about your providence, or a damn will bring you back to your brown, female, perceivably foreign body. Having the mental space to fantasize about gardens and hikes and the universe is a privilege.
Musso went back to France. He used some of the renderings of flowers he extracted from his expedition as the basis for textile designs.
The dynamic of strangeness within the frame of familiarity constructs the exotic, and yet the exotic is always in danger of losing its alien quality as it becomes domesticated. Age, 26, edible parts, rhizome, language, Spanish, kingdom, plante.
I'm not the motherland. I'm not the landscape. I'm framing this composition. I'm not a flower. I'm only here to work. I'm here to entertain you, but only during my shift.
have to work on that audio, sorry for that. It sounds good on my computer. So that, well, I kind of moved on to something else, but that was the performance version of that body of work, which uses these audio tracks to signify a duration of the shift. So as the audio is playing, the performer is covered in this bodysuit, and then there's pauses where the performer takes off the bodysuit as the audio stops. And they repeat that for 2 hours. So it's about putting on this costume in a sense, but also performing as like something that they're very aware of, that they're kind of embodying this pre-constructed bodysuit. I proposed to do this to this Christopher Columbus statue in the Bahamas, but they didn't let me do it, so I did a montage. And they said they didn't want to have a conversation about that, so I put them in a gallery and invited the people who came to the gallery to write their ideas about my proposal. And I don't know, I really like that piece just for what it is, but also in the sense of using the spandex fabric and the wrapping gesture that I was using before on female bodies onto this male colonial statues. And a more recent iteration of what I'm doing with that fabric is what you'll see at the Belle Gallery, which it's a series of kind of architectural containers, if you wish. It comes from the idea of expanding the material into space and having the audience not see it just vicariously in an image, but experiencing the material themselves. Originally, it came out of an exhibition where I was showing the Columbus statue postcards, where the video that you'll see at the Belle Gallery was playing, and in the video, it's kind of looking at how this space called Labadie is set up in a way where, like, as a tourist, you come in a cruise and you spend your few hours in there, but you can take a taxi and go see a museum or do anything else because there's like several layers of walls and fences to keep the locals out and to keep it a secluded space, and how that kind of sets a very specific tone on that space, which is what I was trying to look at in the video. But then in a few occasions when I've shown the video, I have accompanied it with this kind of architectural thing with holes, which kind of predetermine the ways in which people can go in the space. And it's also about blocking and denial and opacity, and at the same time kind of telling you how to move and what to do. This was a art fair. I thought it was a nice thing to kind of cover the whole booth and have people go in that way. And then finally, this is an art fair goer that I thought echoed some of the things that you'll see in the video. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Oh, hello. Hi, everybody. I want to take this second to reiterate some thanks that everyone has had so far. Thank you so much to Joanne and Nicole and Nishan and Murphy and Lewis for making this experience so enjoyable. The installation and organization were amazing. And I want to thank the three artists because this has been such an extreme pleasure. And thank you for allowing us to show your work and trusting us with your work. I have been so excited to show these people because I've known them for a really long time. They're three artists whose work I've been looking at for years. In the case of Zoë Charlton, for 20 years, not to really accentuate our ages, but and it's always an amazing experience when the opportunity and the space arises where you can bring together work that you've been thinking about that cannot leave your head. I've just been thinking about all their work for so many years. It's a pleasure to put it together. So I'm excited also to put this together in an academic institution because I've been teaching here for about 8 years, and every time I come here to teach, I am introduced to students who are grappling with their identity and grappling with where they're from and where they are now, and how to express that in a visual way in the world. And I think these 3 artists do an amazing job of not only talking about their personal experiences and their backgrounds and where they're from, but talking about larger issues that we can all relate to in some way, and that make us think about the world in a different way. So I'm gonna actually just start the conversation. We don't have that much time, with the way that I normally look at work. When I go into an exhibition, the first thing you see is what you see. So it's aesthetics. And the 3 of you are all using, you all talked about it in your talk. Ooh, that just made me short. I'm gonna go back up here. The 3 of you talked about the materials you're using. So we've got stickers and really amazing papers and spandex. And you're all drawing us in, from my perspective, you're drawing us in with beauty. There's like a tactile nature to what you're doing. There's a sparkle in some of them. There are rhinestones. And we could have a debate about this, but I think the spandex is extremely seductive. You want to go over, you want to touch it, and you're physically making us move through it. But then the concepts that you're working with, the underpinnings, the conceptual underpinnings, are very serious. And Maria almost made me cry during her talk. Like, there's emotion and there's a seriousness to it. So I want to talk to you first about how you balance that beauty, and if you're thinking about that when you're dealing with these heavy issues. Who wants to start?
I can say something. Well, in my work, it just comes from the imagery that I grew up surrounded by, and not so much surrounded by, but the imagery that ended up being the identifier in other people's minds when I became an immigrant. So I wanted to use a language that wasn't about explaining myself or being like, oh, look at these other things that we are, but kind of using that same language that I encountered so often projected onto me, and use that same tool to kind of deconstruct itself, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I understand the colors and the flowers and all those things are also very attractive and seductive. And I enjoy them myself, and it's kind of like also me trying to myself deal with the parts that I enjoy, and how can I enjoy this without perpetuating the things that I dislike about them.
Okay. I think, like, in my work, I always think about what is to be an artist. In a sense, it's like I always go to every piece at the beginning with a sense of mystery, and with like I let myself go to find the freedom of thinking of, like, as artists, we can touch other worlds. And for me, that's kind of like my initial thought of, like, kind of being curious of what is gonna happen or what is gonna unveil. But it's to me, it's very important beauty. Like, I feel that, like, these serious issues that we talk about in the work, like, we can either respond to them with, there's different ways to responding to them, but I think that beauty somehow brings hope, and to me that is very important. So to me, I feel like when I go into a piece, I want to find that beauty, and I also want to find the mystery and, like, go somewhere else, go somewhere that we can only sometimes go through making art. So, yeah.
So I love being seduced. I do. I am seduced by my materials, by things that glitter, things that have smooth surfaces, things that look like they don't fit together. And so very often I am attracted to the collection of things that are around me that just don't seem to fit. And that also is in line with the things that I read and what I hear. And so sometimes I'm seduced by how people present themselves and what they say. And I think that's pretty sticky. And I want that in my work. And so when I find that in a material, or I find that in an idea, and then I go after it. So I pay a lot of attention to my impulses and what seduces me. And so I am after those things, finding ways to enhance those things so that when people are looking at the work, they feel that they're sticky too, or they get seduced by them. Like the paper that I use is really smooth and heavy and thick, and it's a beautiful surface. And I rather enjoy it when somebody comes up to a drawing and says, "What is that?" Or when they're looking at collaged elements that peel a little slightly on the ends, at the edges, and are trying to figure out how that thing is made. So yeah, I want the combination of those things too.
And I'm also curious, building on that, you mentioned collage, and it's more in line with the way you see. And I have sort of stretched it to say all three of you are using collage. And I'm curious why you've chosen that form of working. Lynn, maybe to expand a little bit on what you were just saying.
So I didn't start out making collages. It wasn't a way of working that I would have even imagined that I would be doing. Collaging came from a way of thinking. So I would use the stickers that are in the smaller drawings that became the bigger ones as placeholders. And I would start adding them. I would need a tree, so I would find a green tree and stick it there. Oh, I'd like a rainbow, stick it there. I'd like some cottony clouds, and I'd stick it there. And that's a collage, right? But it wasn't until I had several of them where I thought, this is actually interesting. And there's something kind of wrong about it too, right? Collage for me is a way of working and a way of thinking that expanded in a way to make actual larger work and actually make color work.
And Maria, how about you? Because you could paint everything in those pieces, but you choose not to. You choose to take all these different papers, and the labor that it takes to do that is pretty incredible. So why?
Oh, I hate painting. I don't know why. I don't like brushes. They're too messy. And all my colors always turn like mad. So yeah, when I went to school, I was the worst painter in the world. But I was fascinated with drawing. So drawing for me was always like my first love. Second is my son. But drawing was always my first love. So I enjoyed a lot drawing. But then I also knew I had a sensibility for color. And painting was not working, so I found paper. So paper became like this material that gave me the freedom to express in color, and I use paper very painterly. So like when I do collage, I tend not to use scissors. I would just tear a big piece of paper and almost pretend like it was a brush stroke, but without having to get my hands dirty. So collage became like painting to me, and it has so much possibility. It's like endless, like what I can discover with paper, like Zoe was saying, like the edges of a sticker. Like to me, the edges of a paper is like the most precious thing I can ever see, and like I preserve it, I reuse it, and then I I tried also to use paper as if I was drawing with paper. So there's a lot of different ways I use collage. Yeah.
And are you okay with me saying you do collage, Joiri?
Yeah, totally, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think my work has a very collage-y logic and also performative. I just remember I was an educator at the Romer Bearden Foundation, and I taught about collage for a while. Yeah, I think when I stopped, I love painting. Unlike Maria, I did that painting thing after I didn't paint for like 4 years, and I was like, I need to paint something huge. And now it's accumulated again, so I don't know what I'll make next, but maybe I'll go back to painting at some point. But I think when I moved here, I started being more interested in things that were already existing in the world and how to recontextualize them, or how to bring certain things about them to notice. So the idea of kind of juxtaposing different things, or cutting out things, images, having them be repositioned, was more interesting to me than to, draw a figure from scratch, or yeah. Although I also really like drawing, and I miss that too, but yeah.
I think it also leads to a conversation about, when you're finding things in the world and recontextualizing them, there's a struggle between the meaning that they're given out there and then the meaning you're giving them on that painting or on that surface in a gallery space. And I think that for all three of you, the thing, I'm drawn in by this beauty or the sparkle or the whatever that's the smooth surface, right? But then I'm kept there because I see a struggle in all of your work, and whether it's a material struggle or a conceptual struggle, it doesn't matter. There's something happening there. And I feel like for all of you who've been in the gallery already and seen it, in Zoe's work, that body and that landscape are just fighting each other. As far as I can tell, they're fighting each other. And I don't know who's going to win, or I don't know if they're going to be friends. I don't know what's happening. And with Maria's, the landscape and the body are starting to meld together. And although they're beautiful faces, I see so much sadness also and melancholy in those faces. And then Joiri actually has us struggling to get into her piece, like physically struggling. So, and something I love too is there are no answers in any of your pieces. You're not giving us an answer to a question. You're not finding a solution. You're asking a lot of questions of yourself and of your audience. And I'd like to know kind of some of the questions you're asking yourself in the studio, or the questions you hope other people are asking themselves when they come to your work. Is that hard? Too hard?
No. But, I don't want to, it's so funny because I think some of my questions in my studio are real practical ones. I think one of the more interesting talks I heard, someone asked an artist that, and she said, I'm just trying to figure out how to use yellow, like hands of yellow. And I thought, you know what? All I'm trying to do is figure out how to cut a straight edge, or think about where the drawing and the painted surface and the collage meet, and how they either work in harmony or they are truly a disruption. Like, how do I make that work? And then how does that actually mirror what I'm thinking? How do I think about the way that I'm pressed into a world that often doesn't look like me? How do I handle impressions or assumptions about me that are pressed on me, and how do I fight against that, right? Me as a drawing. And I think about those things. So those are those conceptual kinds of twists and turns that mirror the things that I'm doing with the material, or through the act of drawing and collaging, or having painted things. And so things that look like they're drawn in a very sketchy way and then painted in a very gestural way, things that look like they're drawn like a thought versus things that are applied to a surface that seem very concrete and heavy and bright and have a lot more weight than a body does, but can't be supported without it, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with Zoe in a sense, like a lot of times at the studio we're trying to create something, but we are also confined with who we are. You know what I mean? Like there's like the material, but there's also the person. So sometimes, even if you don't want, if you're having a hard day at the studio and you don't want it, you're trying to portray that, it will. So I think it's a that for us, even if you want to hide behind your art, it wouldn't be possible. So if you are carrying some sort of weight, it would come out. So I think it's like I tend to let myself be, because as a woman in the art world, as everything that I carry, it is important that your work also portrays that. So yeah.
Yeah, likewise, I think some of my questions have to do with, like, as a very interdisciplinary person by choice, how do I communicate an idea better? What is a better discipline than another? Or can something take different embodiments in artwork? And then also thinking about embodiment as a more conceptual or like life experience type of concern. And I guess especially with the bodysuits or with the spandex installations, how do bodies move around space? How do some bodies have more access than others? How some bodies are kind of pre-imagined, whereas some other bodies don't have to deal with some baggages, and how what happens after taking off those bodysuits, I think, is what I'm concerned with recently the most.
I don't know how we're doing on time. Okay, yeah. I would love to take a few questions from the audience at this point, if anyone has them. There are microphones on the two aisles, if anyone would like to go up and ask a question of the artists.
I wanted to help yours. Let's go first. Like that.
Well, I'm going to start with one while people are getting their thoughts together. And I just want to ask Maria, the newer pieces seem to have, unless I misunderstood what I was looking at, a lot more painting in them. So are you coming around to liking painting?
No. No, I you know, every time I start painting, when I like it, I stop. So yeah, there's a lot of the faces have a lot more watercolor. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I'm doing a little bit more watercolor in the faces, but yeah, but that's kind of the only place. But yeah.
Hi, one of the things that I love about all of your work is that, as well as being so beautiful, it's all pretty subversive. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
You troublemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, something that I...
Do you see it as subversive?
Oh, yeah, totally. It goes along with the idea of deconstructing things from within, or using an embodiment to question the things that represents to others, and things like that. So I'm very aware of it, and very intentional about it as well. Yeah.
I know, you're right. So how do you get sometimes how do you get the things that you want, or how do you get the things that you need? Sometimes you ask them directly, and sometimes you have to work underneath things, and sometimes things have to be coded. So I tend to think that coded asks, coded questions, and coded answers are very useful in this world, right? Because they can operate on multiple levels and reach multiple kinds of people, and then you can get the information that you need. Like, I think that silence is a code, right? So, and it's just telling, right? So, yeah, I do think that my work has subversive elements in it, and I even think I understand that using stickers and enlarging them is a kind of subversive activity too, because what I'm hoping is that people look at some of those images and say, this looks kind of familiar, kind of looks familiar, but why is this growing off of her in this way or hanging off her in this way? But they're attracted to the image. The image gets sticky, and then they realize, oh, that was that thing that I used to have in my scrapbook collection when I was a kid, but that's not what I would do with it when I was a kid. You know, so I think that things like that are useful.
I don't understand the question. What do you mean by subversive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
what do you mean? Sorry. Like.
Things that work under.
Well, in particular, there's the piece that you did recently with the women holding the birds.
Yes.
And how do I describe it? I mean, it is subversive to me because it's as if it's very gentle, but of course it's not gentle at all. Okay. So that you're using sort of an image of gentility to project a thought that is horrifying, really, as well as hopeful.
Yeah, you know, I think that it's intentional, you know? I think it's intentional to try to go around themes that are sad or like painful, but try to see them with a light of hope, you know? And it's also, how do you do that, you know? Like it's very hard. And like sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. But I think it is intentional to try to navigate the world, thinking of how to see it with a different light, I guess. So, yeah.
You know, something I was fascinated by when I was looking at your work is, and we were talking about this earlier, is I recognized some of your material because I have some of that material, and what struck me is actually where you're pulling, those are dead birds, right? They're dead birds and they're dead feathers, but you're using them in this way that's really colorful and joyful and hopeful, and it's really beautiful. But knowing the source shifted the way that I started to read that image, and I thought that was really powerful, and that actually gave me a slight chuckle. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I really like that.
I feel also on that note, and to piggyback on something you said earlier about codes, I feel that when I see art that is direct, it doesn't stay with me as much as when I see art that is asking me to figure things out. Like when I figure something out by myself, even if the artist puts all the clues in there and they are very aware of what they want you to know, when you figure it out, you feel it's like Inception. It's like someone is kind of like sneaking an idea into your head, and you think that you figured it out, that it's your idea, that you have something to do with that. And I enjoy that idea that my work could do that. I don't know if it does, but I hope it does.
It does.
Yeah.
Hi, I had a question about sourcing. Maria talked really specifically about where the paper comes from, but Zoe and Joiri, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the sourcing of the stickers or the fabric, and Maria too, if any of the symbologies that come with the materials are important to you. Thank you.
the imagery on the collage sections are all come from whatever is out in the world. They're at craft stores, they're scrapbookers' delights. They're from Mrs. Grossman stickers and Creative Imagination stickers, and that's right. That's what they are. But I think more importantly is they are asking. They have artists and graphic designers make these images, and these images are attached to a community of people, a culture of people, an age of someone, right? So looking at a tree, a generic tree that's flatly painted and that has a black outline around it with fake snow on it is actually sourced from something that you would find in a preschool teacher's toolbox, right? And then a sticker is made out of that and mass produced, right? Those kinds of things. So there's a kind of history where those things come from, or an image of a deciduous tree that is a photograph of a tree, but that has been lightly brushed and through like Photoshop, what have you, and then made into a sticker, and then I print it out larger, is done that way because it starts to look like an impressionist tree, a painting, right? And so that's tied to a particular history, right? And so that's where that's where the referent comes from, and I am banking on someone recognizing that, right? The figures come from a lot of online sources. I mean, I was excited to see your source material because some of that is mine too. You know, I used to call, when I was looking through magazines, I would just call them, they're just like men's and women's interest magazines, right? Porn. And so so a lot of different places.
Yeah, I'm super interested in the history of the fabrics that I use and how they became so popular, how they became like mass-produced, the specifically tropical design. Not all of it, but like the ones that have like very well rendered images of very well rendered representations of plants. To me, have like a very obvious connection to botanical illustrations, and the history of those is also tied into colonialism and assessing the resources of the newfound lands and things like that. So to me, it's interesting how that then becomes something that is still commodified and capitalized on, but through this lens of kind of leisure and superficiality and decoration and all of that. And I've spent a good minute reading about like Hawaiian shirts and how they came to existence and occupied Hawaii and the time when that happened. Yeah, so I'm interested in all of that. Spandex is like a new-ish material. It's produced in a different way. And even the prints that are printed onto it, I mean, there's all sorts of prints on spandex. You can, upload an image and get your spandex printed home with whatever, your cat or whatever. But I'm interested in what's already out there. And like Zoe said, someone designed that with a purpose of like, seducing a particular audience, and I'm interested in kind of breaking that down and how that still echoes designs from another time, from another type of production that is, that it's kind of like, I'm missing a word, but it's
like nostalgic or something.
Yeah, it's nostalgic, but it's
like that.
Yeah, that it's designed to look like something that is from out of this time, in a way. Like, that to me is interesting.
I think it's history.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions?
Hi. Thank you so much for all your work. It was really beautiful. And I hope you get to cover the Columbus statue sometime.
Me too.
I hope that it actually comes through. Maria, I'm also from Bogotá, so hi. I just had a question about the faces in your collages. Like, why did you choose to make the same skin tone for all of them? And why did you choose to make like that really white, pale skin tone for like all of your subjects? Migrants, like, was it for like universality or something, or like what were you thinking when you did that?
Yeah, I see it like they have an otherworldly, like an otherworldly feeling, and to me also it was important that, like I guess their paleness gives that otherworldly, like they're not from here, you know. So they are kind of like when I draw or when I paint, I don't usually use like an exact reference. So I would, let's say, draw your eyes and then draw somebody else's nose, then draw somebody else's mouth. So to me, they're all very otherworldly. So they are not, they don't belong to like a specific race. So if you go closer, they all have blue under their eyes, yellow on their eyelids, and pink in their cheeks. So that's kind of also aesthetically how I make them. Yeah.
And you've talked to me about them being ghosts.
The what?
Like the word ghosts
Yes.
is what you've used when you've talked to me about them.
Yeah, a little bit like they are kind of ghosts or like ghostly looking. So, yeah.
More.
Thank you for the three of you for being here. My question is for Maria. I'm super fascinated at how you use human and nature to create these this magical realism that you talked about. And you talked about sort of the things that we might gain and lose in migration. And I'm amazed at how such complicated topics like migration and displacement are put into these fantastical worlds. And so one of the examples of what we might gain and lose that you gave us was freedom. And so I'm wondering, what are sort of the other things that you're thinking of portraying in your work that we might gain or lose?
Like in a lot of the works, I try to use symbolism as a like you said, like kind of like in a sense use magical realism or symbolism to play with these ideas. But yeah, let's say in that painting that I was describing, he's losing his freedom, but it's also from making that painting, I started the whole series of the Nightingales, which was this woman who had half a wing instead of an arm. So it's not only thinking of what you can gain or lose, or if you're losing your freedom, but it's also thinking of these women as warriors and thinking of them as these things that makes them different, empowers them as well. So I think, yes, there's this theme of what they gain or what they lose, but it's also, I want these women to be powerful as well and use their whatever we think is different about them as something positive. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to everyone.